Welcome to the Emerging Biotech Leader, where we help biotech leaders maximize the value of their therapeutics from translational development to product launch. We're your hosts. I'm Kim Kushner.
And I'm Ramin Farhood. We are here to help you navigate the pitfalls of the biotech industry and illuminate the path forward.
Welcome to today's episode of the Emerging Biotech Leader. Today, we're so glad to welcome Jackie Levine, one of the SVPs at SSI Strategy, to reflect on the learnings from our previous episode with Dr. Dan Bloomfield from Anthos Therapeutics. We're going to touch on three themes that Dan really highlighted in his prior episode that we found really fascinating. First, how you build a biotech with the end in mind when the end is shifting or changing and evolving with your organization. Two, what it means to be a connector and how you connect people and skills to help them grow in their own development, but also to support your organization. And lastly, some reflections on how Dan's personality has evolved as a leader, and some of the prior guests that we've had on the show have had similar attributes and characteristics to their own leadership style that we've found incredibly fascinating. So, Jackie, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So to start us off, I would love to talk about this concept of the moving goalpost when it comes to the end in mind. We've heard it from Dan. We've heard it from prior guests as well as a number of our clients that when you're in a biotech, you want to plan with this end in mind, but we don't always know what the end is. So Jackie, Ramin, maybe we could start off just with some initial reflections on how do you think about building an organization when you don't fully know what you're building for? What does that look like?
I think that's a great point and something that we've seen a lot, throughout the industry. It is a moving goalpost. So when you're thinking about your organization, you need to think long term of what you might need, but also what do you need today and how you build in that flexibility and scalability so that you're not overbuilding, you're not introducing unnecessary risk, but you're able to achieve what you need to achieve today and also what you're planning to achieve, along the continuum of the activities.
Right. No, I can certainly agree, Jackie. I think one of the most important thing, first of all, you have to realize, especially if you're in a smaller biotech or a startup, you have to be, not only you have to have that end goal in mind, you also have to stay flexible with it, right? Because there's so many unknowns on the way to get there that you want to make sure that you stay open-minded to other opportunities or other way of doing things that may be beneficial to accelerate to getting to your goal, or maybe even the goal may change or shift a little bit. That's going to be really, really critical to keep the organization, kind of very, very much grounded and avoiding some of the common pitfalls that organization may go through. What are some of your thoughts, Kim? What have you seen with some of our clients?
The most challenging thing for many organizations is to solve for the temporal issue of, I need something now, but I don't know that that's what I need now is going to translate to what I need in 6 months or need in 12 months. And in some circumstances, you find a really great athlete that can flex with the organization and you know that they're going to be able to evolve despite what the role is, and they can wear 12 hats. And that's obviously very critical with the biotech. But there's only so many people you can have in these flexible roles. You do need to build a team of specialized expertise so that you can have the array of skills to meet the critical milestones and progress your programs. And so balancing the flexibility that you need for the evolving timeline you're working on with the skill array that you're going to need to actually deliver the milestones to get you there is this very chicken or egg scenario. And we're seeing a lot of organizations, and it's kind of trends over the last 3 to 4 years, early COVID, we had overbloated staff that got significantly pulled back. And we've kind of gone through these ups and downs in the industry of growth and retrenchment in how people are thinking about building their organization. But we're seeing organizations be much more open to a different model. We're seeing VCs investing in different kinds of growth platforms. And what I mean by that is how you're actually building the biotech from the earliest days. It's not just the natural organic, when I get to phase 2, I'm going to have 150 people kind of straight line growth, but really flexing into alternative resourcing models that allow the flexibility, but retain the core institutional knowledge that will follow the asset and follow the organization, the platform through not just a major filing, but certainly through a successful launch and, hopefully lifecycle management and the future growth, if that's your goal, and or, an asset exit in many circumstances. So ultimately, a lot more interest in alternative resourcing models, but it's in pockets. I wouldn't say the industry is fully there yet.
And that's one of the challenges that I've noticed that too, and I'd love to get both of your input on is we talked about what's really important to the organization. What we need, a lot of things get done today, right? And we need the right expertise today, right? The higher up the expertise, the higher up the experience, the longer it takes to find these individuals, right? The recruitment process for some of these roles are easily about 6 months, right? And that's a lifetime for a startup or a small biotech company. 6 months is a long time. On the other hand, in parallel, another level of complexity is that you're constantly waiting for additional data to be released so you can make the right decision. So you're not just building an organization in a vacuum. You have to align that with the data that is coming out. That is it a positive data, negative data? Is it a data something in between that you need to think differently? How do you manage that expertise that you want that you don't have today, right? And it takes 6 months. At the same time, in 6 months, you may not actually need that expertise. You might have moved on to something else that you realize you want. And sometimes these expertise are not even full time. You may need somebody like a 20% of the time or 50% of the time. How do you guys manage that and advise on thinking about that?
I think it's, you need to look at what the goals are, as we talked about both today and longer term, and making sure that you have the flexibility. So, some of these roles you'll bring in-house. They might be strategically critical. You might know you need a full-time resource in that role. And then other roles, either they're less strategically critical or they're not a full-time role, or you just can't, unable to find the right folks to do that. So those are the roles that you might look to outsource and be able to build in that flexibility in your model so that you can quickly ramp up or ramp down depending on how your needs evolve, how the data, plays out, how your end goal might shift. If you're, thinking that you're building to get acquired very rapidly, you might not invest in all of the same infrastructures if you're building to take, the product to launch. And then what does that look like?
The other piece to add there is many organizations kind of skip the strategic planning step of doing a detailed inflection point analysis to understand at what point am I de-risking each step in the process. And by de-risking between step A and step B, what is that unlocking for my business? Is it opening the door for me to begin to hire in these key roles that will translate long term? Is it unlocking this additional effort that I wasn't going to touch until I get to this additional point? So I think Dan referenced, when I hit a certain point, I really needed to build an entire safety function. And, previously we weren't at the point where that was a critical milestone for the business, but then it very quickly became incredibly urgent. And so knowing what's coming so that you can prepare for it, and then leveraging not just your team, but your network and connecting people in a way that allows you to fill those gaps is really critical as you're starting to plan for the business. And that's one thing that, I'd love us maybe to evolve this conversation a little bit is Dan, both in his earliest days in large pharma, but also in his experiences in biotech, has really succeeded in being quite the connector. And I really appreciated his story from his days at Merck when he was managing people that didn't have the same skills or experience as himself. And he kind of did a little bit of an undercover boss situation to kind of learn what the skills are and really so that he could relate to his people. But then took it upon himself to be an ultimate connector and say, if you don't understand how this piece works, go talk to this person. I'm going to curate these connections to allow you to learn everything you need to do to be successful in your role, but I won't be able to provide that for you. It goes for how you're thinking about growing your business and making the connections and finding who can help you fill those gaps when you have those gaps, because you've spent so much of your career kind of connecting the dots and connecting the people who can advise you and support you along the way. So we'd love your thoughts and feedback on not just network development, but the curation of the connections that will support yourself and the people around you.
Yeah, I think and Dan talked about that a lot as you referenced. I think understanding that having those connection points gives you a better understanding of the full value chain, right, across the entire continuum, not just in your function or immediately connecting functions, but really along the whole continuum. So having that, those connections, that understanding gives you a better sense of the big picture and the impacts. If this happens, then that, and then how to, start being able to think about, risk mitigation, planning, and those implications along the continuum.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's such an important thing. And for whatever reason, it takes a while in your career to get to that point, to realize how important it is to have that connections, relationship, and being able also to connect people to where they need to go. And especially even if it's a smaller pharma, that's really, really important. And big pharma becomes even more important, which a lot of his experience came from, because there's so much knowledge and experience sitting there that a lot of things that you're trying to resolve on your own or with your own team, somebody else might have already done it, or somebody else can actually provide input to it. So that alignment, connections, being able to kind of build internal credibility and relationship and connection with folks is such a critical thing. Most of us, I think what happens, and I'm guilty of this too, we go very deep in our own department, right? We become a leader in an area, and you kind of rise the ranks, and you really become an expert in that one area. And we don't take time to look at the macro level. We don't take necessarily a step back and look at the connections of different aspects of a company that are interdependent of each other, because we're so busy making sure that, I deliver what I promised to deliver to the organization, right? And we miss that whole other piece that allows you to be such a more strategic thinker, such a much better probably partner with a lot of your cross-functional stakeholders, which also builds that connectivity with others. Two, if you only stay within your own department, as good as you may get there, but you don't connect across the organization and have really a good appreciation of what others do in the department, not just the connection with the email and their contact info that so and so is the head of this department, right? It's in a deeper level that you have a better understanding of what they do. People love to talk about what they do, what the department is all about, and it's a great opportunity to kind of build that around your organization. And it's a culture. To me, it's more of a culture that, this is something that you want to teach your team, that this is how you want to operate, right? Think big picture. Don't do what you need to do and be great at it. But at the same time, you've got to think cross-functionally and making sure that you think that way as well.
Yeah, it takes an incredible amount of humility to take on a role that you have not done the more junior roles of. So I've always been so impressed how, Dan took on leading a PMO function, and he had never done that role before. He doesn't even have the same skills as these people, and was like, I'm going to learn what it takes to manage these people and do the best I can. And that it takes humility and a really impressive leadership style to be able to lean into that, recognize your strengths and the strengths of your team, but also, to your point, Ramin, to really stretch your mind to all of these different areas in the business and how they connect to each other, and what you have to learn and know in order to be successful in all of the different areas. So it's kind of taking yourself out of your own role and applying it to the team around you. I know in the past we've talked about this quite a bit, but I'm thinking not just from the last conversation with Dan, but many of the leaders that we've talked about. Ramin, you called this out, and there's such an incredible humility that they seem to each evolve into in their own career trajectories, and maybe it didn't they didn't have it at the start of their careers. I don't know, but through their experiences and taking on these roles that really stretch their comfort zone and their mind to different skills and how the skills all progress the programs and the assets in the way they want to. Um, it's incredibly impressive to see how that actually plays out in their own humility and leadership style.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such an important attribute. Being able to say "I don't know" and you don't have the answer to it when you're sitting in a room with a C-suite and senior leadership team. It's not an easy thing to do, right? And also as you go through your career, uh, you're not also being really encouraged and trained to be able to say, "Oh, well, I don't know the answer to this one," or I can't, but I can find the answer to it, right? So sometimes that our ego gets on the way, that we pretend that we know something that we may not know. But I tell you, once you get beyond that, there's such a relief because there's so many smart people and experts in what they do that you can tap into, and they know what that is, and being able to first kind of realize that you don't need to know everything and it's perfectly fine, right?
Agreed. And I think building on that, it's being self-aware and having a good understanding of what what your strengths are and where there might be some gaps, whether it's in a particular expertise or a skill, and being able to pull in the right people, and really connects to what we were just talking about of the connector theme. So you have a network of people, you've encouraged your team to have that bigger picture understanding. And so you know who to pull in, so you can pull in the right people at the right time. So it's not just you, you're not an island of one. You have a team and you're all in this together and driving towards the same goals.
Absolutely agreed. And one thing I really appreciated that Dan called out, he reflected on something he learned earlier in his career, that when he expressed things to people, they kind of took it as a directive, that this was what had to happen. And he recognized the gravity of the things he said, and he started to pressure test himself. And before he jumped in a meeting, said, like, wait, why am I talking? What am I adding here? Am I saying something that is going to drive a whole project that I didn't intend? And the self-awareness as a leader to take a step back and pause and just say, like, where am I going to direct this if I speak, and what am I saying, and how is that going to be perceived? And it was really, I thought, a simple approach, but so meaningful to how you drive a team towards these outcomes that you really want to achieve. And if you hire really great people and you bring in the diverse skill sets that you need to build, you're never going to have all the answers. You have to trust the team around you. You have to trust the team you've built. And really your job is to enable them to be successful in the roles that you've put them in. And so building those bridges, making the connections, thinking about kind of the ultimate goal, I think it's a really mature kind of way of thinking, and certainly one that, I took a note as he was kind of giving some of those reflections. Is definitely a learning.
Yeah, so did I. I certainly agree with you. I mean, first of all, I wrote "wait" on a sticky note. Why am I talking? Because I do that a lot. I find myself that, well, I have something really important to say that I want to share with the team, right? And that may be the case, but there's also a lot of other people have a lot of other important things to say, right? So it really helps, especially at the leader, and as hard as it is, because the reason you are a leader, right, is because you got all this experience and expertise, and you kind of really want to share your knowledge, making sure that the team doesn't make the same mistakes or accelerate in certain areas, and so on and so forth. But it's very humbling that you stay quiet and kind of listen to what others are saying. I think Amazon actually had a rule, I believe. Jeff, the CEO of Amazon, had a rule that he was the last one in a meeting. The more senior that you were in the meeting, the the closer to the last that you will be speaking at that meeting. And his reasoning was that I didn't want my thinking or the seniors sitting in the room, same reason that Dan said, that take this as an action item. And all of a sudden you see the team is running and doing something about it, as opposed to that this was just an idea that maybe I just put out there or as a direction for the team. And that self-awareness is incredibly challenging and sometimes difficult, because you got this knowledge and you just want to make sure everybody else sees it and hears it, but that's not necessarily always the best for the team either. And you see that, to your point, Kim, you see that through all of our interviews. That's something that I've noticed, that intense kind of a humility that the folks have, and being okay with not knowing the answers. And of course, as you're growing in your career, you're not going to know everything, right? You just going to know more than what you did before, but you're not going to know everything either, especially if you're kind of accelerating and trying to make multiple things happen at the same time. So I think that's much needed. It's not a nice to have. I think it's a must have, that humility, and being able to listen to the expertise of others.
Absolutely. I'm not going to let you move off the point that you just referred to Jeff Bezos as just Jeff, like your old friends. So we're going to let that one land.
Everybody knows him, right?
Everyone, yeah. Old friends, absolutely. But I completely agree, and I think this has been a really great discussion about not just what it takes to meet the major inflection points to grow and establish an early biotech, but really stretching yourself as a leader to think about what roles you can take on that might be outside of your comfort zone, and flexing into those roles, and how you can make connections to the people and the skills around you to enable you to try new things. And by trying new things, you're going to probably better position yourself for the long-term roles you want to play, whether it's CMO, CEO, something in between. Trying these different positions also allows you to really figure out your footing and where you're best positioned to add value in the roles that you want to take on long term. So a lot of really great learnings. Jacqui, thank you so much for joining today's show. Looking forward to future conversations.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Emerging Biotech Leader, an SSI strategy podcast. Join us each month for more conversations with biotech leaders. If you'd like to help navigating the complexities of biotech, reach out to our team at ssistrategy.com. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review.